world of good because I heard about it for days after. So
That's awesome, Alice.
yeah,
Truly is. I think we should definitely do that.
social interactions are valuable.
This has been, I've actually kind of really enjoyed this. I'm not the most technical guy, but I've really enjoyed this, just seeing and speaking to people again. Absolutely, Elizabeth. Well, it's 11 o'clock, and I am, at least according to Brandy's schedule, and the facilitator for this. So without further ado, I figured we'd start. I've done two other circulation sessions thus far. The first one ended up talking pretty much heavily about COVID and how COVID has impacted services. And then the second one, we kind of talked about some of the technical issues that it created. But I kind of figured I'd start today since we have at least, I don't think Maura, Ashley, or Jamie, I've seen you thus far in a circ session. So I'd be happy to see if any of the three of you would like to throw any ideas out that you have interest in, and then we'll go from there if you're willing. That's okay. You guys don't all have to jump in at once. I understand. A lot of voices right now.
Well, I'll give a little background first. So
Sure.
I'm from Center College, and I started out in the library in circulation, so kind of cut my teeth there. And we had an old system. Then I helped migrate us to WMS and switched over to systems. So I still feel very rooted in circulation, and I am the one who has to set up all the policies and make all the dark magic happen. And so I'd gone to the other sessions, and I kind of don't feel right unless I do a circulation session because I still am very involved in it. But I don't know that I have a lot of direct questions. I just kind of wanted to hear what people are going through. I know that what our staff, what we've, had to set up for the no contact exchange of materials and stuff like that. So I'm just happy to be here and to take in whatever I can.
Sounds good. Maura, I see your comment as well. Totally understand. If you have a question or something you want to throw in the chat, we'd be happy to answer too. Well, I'll just start by asking you then, Jamie, how much have you felt like it's changed your day-to-day circulation wise, or at least for the circulation department? If you're doing most of the back end stuff, have you seen a ton of change in terms of your all's policies in that case?
Well, so back in March, it was the mass exodus, and it was like a free-for-all in terms of like, we didn't even bother telling people to return books, or just go, get out while you can, run for your lives. So then we tried to do this getting books returned from graduating seniors. So did this prepaid mailing label, which is, oh my God, I don't ever want to do that crap again. And then it was like, okay. And we did have, we tried to have a full return to the fall semester, and they successfully did it. We did this weird compressed thing. So everybody left, the semester ended at Thanksgiving, thank God.
Same.
And so I feel pretty confident we've got material that will never come back. And that pains me personally, because I'm that person who's like always tracking down every single thing. So, but I've just had to let go of it. COVID's changed me in many ways. That's one of them. But as we were trying to have some semblance of a fall semester, we were physically closed because, not just because of the pandemic, but we were having a renovation done. So then we had to institute this sort of like contact-free pickup. We put stuff on a lobby table. We used our hold system for that. We did make our hold system more fully featured, which I'm very thankful for. Seems to be working okay. We had a skeleton crew of student workers. Again, I wasn't doing the circulation duties. Most of the changes I made on the circulation backend involved removing all notifications about things being due, because I just felt like that was just adding stressors.
The last thing you wanted to do, exactly.
Only left it in place for interlibrary loan, because that one we're kind of like, hey, yeah, we got to get that back.
Yep.
We also, before the pandemic, removed all of our fines, because I felt like we were literally nickeling and diming people, and that was just ridiculous. And so that took some complication out of the mix. But I guess it held steady. Okay. I mean, definitely our circulation statistics are down, but, and that worries our director, but, we're supposed to open in January, so we'll see. We're super nervous about that. Sorry, it's a lot of talk.
Oh no, Jamie, you should see the overall circulation statistics that I have access to. It's a tank. It just went down to absolutely nothing at the end of March. And we sort of saw a slow rebound sort of at the end of May. And I think that was people just canceling fines and logging into things and checking. It was just the usual end of the year sort of little blip, and then nothing all summer. And then a little bit of a spike of hope in September, late August, and then the slow return back to nothingness towards the end of the semester. I'm expecting to see another little like spike again, where people are just like canceling fines and renewing items. But yeah, it's across the board. It's also across the globe. So I've got access to statistics to your colleagues in our Canada Data Center, in Europe and Africa and the Middle East, and in Australia, New Zealand, and sort of Southeast Asia. It's everybody. It's everyone.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to your points, Jamie, we've had pretty much an identical experience. Our department came back, Alice, we came back July 1st, I think was our first day back circulating items. And U of L, I don't know exactly what our problem is at Ekstrom Library, but we decided to go back pretty much to the desk first thing. And we put up barriers. We've been checking out in person since July 1. And we have definitely had our issues, particularly with, conflicting policies, conflicting ideas, and this is one of those things, U of L has 5 branch libraries, or I don't want to call them branch libraries, because if the dean heard me, he'd chase me down and yell at me for calling them branches. We have 5 separate libraries underneath one beautiful umbrella, all of whom are equal and wonderful together, except Ekstrom, which is much bigger. But all of those libraries were given the option of doing pretty much what they wanted for themselves, as opposed to coordinating it across the 5 libraries. And so it made a real mess for the Office of Library Technologies, who do all the back end work and had to coordinate the back end of 5 different policies, 5 different ideas as to what they should be doing in COVID, 5 different times of coming back into the building. Our department was back July 1, but Art Library didn't come back until late August, and Kornhauser only sort of ever came back. They've been mostly using security to keep the building open. It's more of a study hall. So it's been kind of all over the place for us as well. And the one thing we have been able to do is, we cut off fines, we cut off we changed the due date receipts. We use the IDA, or like the long note field in the due date receipts, to let people know they can pretty much not worry about fines. And then one thing we used was the 1,000 character limit on the in Discovery, actually, and we changed what some of the Discovery notes are saying, so that when people find items, that they know that where to expect them or when to expect them, which, we've obviously had to change quite a bit of our internal procedures. So that was actually one of those helpful changes that we took advantage of, was using that note limit.
Yeah, I used the bulk renewal 2 times. Once back in March to just push everything into the fall. And then once we got closer to that, I just kept pushing it back. So I'm super thankful for that. It was very helpful. It's not nearly as complicated, I think, as it looks. If you just follow the instructions, it's a little scary. So like some of my colleagues were on that session in the lightning rounds, and they were all texting me like, "Oh my God, thank you." And I'm like, "Oh, it's not that bad. Okay."
Well, Andy works with Alice and I, and we love Andy to death. But I was watching that lightning round and my eyes glazed over, because that much technology information for me is like, oh man, you might as well be speaking like 8 different languages. I get lost. I'm really glad I have an Andy, because otherwise, oh, Lord only knows what would have happened if I had been told I needed to find a way to fix this.
I am very thankful for OCLC's documentation.
Very true.
They just keep doing a great job of that, and it helps tremendously.
We shouldn't tell OCLC that because they get a big head about these things.
Yeah. But actually, to that point, if you guys, because of COVID and because so many people, like in the last breakout session, we were talking to Burton at the seminary. And yeah, that he's a one-man shop. He's only been there a little while and he has no idea how these things work. So we've been looking at our documentation with fresh eyes, because a lot of it was originally conceived as like, here's this page, here's what's on the page. And there's not a lot of context about what else you should care about or what else you should look at first. So we've been trying to create some more of those connections. So if you guys come across documentation, you guys have a minute to send an email to support to be like, this was bad, this made no sense, we'd appreciate it. Because then we'll know where to focus.
Just make sure I heard you right. You want me to send a note saying this is bad for every page I can find. Heard.
Yeah, and Elizabeth told me to say that.
Elizabeth said this is bad and I should send as many notes as possible. All right. From your lips to God's ear, I hear you. Alice, I'm kind of curious, even though we literally work in the same department, would you want to share how COVID has impacted you? Because you have such an interesting and unique job experience that I think a lot of people probably don't get to see. I mean, you could literally show your camera a little bit higher and show them.
Yeah,
is that your ASR behind you?
That's a big old beautiful RS.
Yes. For me, it's kind of interesting from the day one, like March 18th, I think was the day that or the 17th, I think it was St. Patrick's Day actually for me, but March 18th, we shut down our department and we started working from home. And I obviously can't do this place, do this from home. So Matt and Andy, they said, here's a laptop, here's some projects, go work at home. So that was a huge change for me, that part. But I came in during the pandemic, like from, March, every few days or every couple of days, I came in to check on the cranes because our provider, Dematic, they went into a no support clause during this time because they could not promise someone to be sent out from their company should we experience a breakdown. So, I couldn't really do my job here if I wanted to. Nobody was here. I would have been safe, actually, in here, but by myself. But anyway, it's impacted that way. In terms of patrons and such like that, when we didn't circulate things in our department, circulation for a long time because we were trying to figure a way through this. And then guidelines were coming out. Matt had our department divide into some groups and like physical spaces, services, and there was a third group. But and so we worked, kind of working together, trying to find our way, looking at CDC, ALA, what other libraries within our structure, Kornhauser, I think, went live first in terms of dealing with people. And then we kind of learned what they were doing. And yeah, Matt's right. I mean, it's kind of interesting. The information and guidance has been different for different places. It's been different in our country, and as I'm kind of a senior member in our institution, I've been here a long time year-wise, and I've been on this earth a little bit longer than a lot of folks in our building. And, if we as a country, had been more uniform, I think we wouldn't have seen as much strife for a lot of us. And that's, I'm probably touching on something that's very personal, but personally for me, but I have to say, I'm impressed with our supervisors that I've had in my life, Matt and our dean and our associate dean, because I mean, all of us, who knew that we would be in a pandemic and having to deal with these, situations. And so I'm appreciative for our local leadership in our government, in Kentucky. I'm appreciative of, I've seen a lot of creativity. I mean, it's been an interesting situation and we're still in it. I mean, obviously, but that's, Matt wanted to find out my experience, but I feel real lucky because I have had a job. I've known people, 1 out of every 4 people, they say in this country, has experienced financial loss. Forget the physical loss of life and health. And And I feel very blessed, to be in a place where I've been, and Matt and Andy were very creative. I mean, hey, Alice, this is what I want you to do. And I tried to, find things to, it's been a good time to look at policies and procedures. We've been going through our existing policy and procedure manual, and a lot of it was out of date because a lot of times we just get busy with life, right? And then, so it's been a good thing to adapt and get that up to date, but also adapt to COVID. There's certain things that we just really probably can do away with and then adapt, so it's all been, I mean, that's a silver lining for me on that, so anyway, I'll quit yakking.
No, but to Alice, to your point, and for Jamie, another one of the trends that we're seeing are a lot of WMS libraries, more in the US than anywhere else, are removing fines and bill structures from their policies. And I'm very interested to see whether that ever trends back the other way, whether we start seeing those policies reinstituted, or if everybody says we need that revenue. Maybe we will need that revenue more than ever, and actually fines increase. And you really start more aggressively going after those lost and long overdue materials. So we'll be keeping an eye on that trend as well.
It's funny you mentioned that is, Extrim has never charged fines. We put fines on accounts, but as long as the item comes back undamaged, we remove them. And one of the, it's kind of funny, Jamie, you mentioned that you're very much like, I need to track down every item. I'm like the direct opposite. Like I don't know, like maybe 6 months ago, one of my bosses, the associate dean, said something like, you just got to learn to live with things. And I was like, all right, man, you want me to take that approach? I'll live with it. I have no idea. I mean, I do have an idea of what's gone out the door, but since our bosses have basically said, look, let's just give everybody the benefit of the doubt as many times as possible, we've relaxed almost every one of our major policies. And really, I think we were shocked, and maybe, Alice, I'm sure you have some thoughts here too, is we were shocked at how much we initially thought we would have to stop doing that we've actually been able to maintain. And we had heard pretty much a horror story immediately. We had heard one of the ILL departments we were close to in another ARL had to shut down their entire ILL department because of a COVID outbreak within the department. And we were very worried that we would have to shut off different parts of our job duties. Essentially, we were worried about ILL. We were worried about desk work. And I won't say it's been perfect. We've had our own struggles with positive tests, but we're a big department. We've got, I think, 12 staff and 35 students. So these things feel almost inevitable. But in terms of sticking to our guns, with the exception of changing our hours quite a bit, we've been able to maintain a lot of our services that I thought in March there'd be no way in hell we'd be doing come August, honestly.
I'm actually curious, and I apologize if you guys have talked about this yesterday. We can skip it. What happened with your student workers when campuses closed down? How many of them stuck with you? Whether there were special sort of policies at the institution level that you had to put in place to protect them? How'd that go?
So our student workers are divided into two groups. We have what we call tier 1s and tier 2s. The tier 1s are kind of our general population. It makes it sound like they're in prison. They're our usual students who do like the baseline stuff, the desk work. And we basically, all of the tier 1s we had to let go as pretty much as a matter of course, since we were all sent home. I ended up convincing the dean to let us retain our tier 2s for the entire time, and we gave them busy work to make sure that they were employed through the pandemic. But as soon as we reopened in July 1st, we rehired everybody who wanted to come back. And we had about 40 students when the pandemic hit in March. And I think my student supervisor, I think, ended up reporting that 75% of them wanted to come back and wanted to continue working during the pandemic. And I know part of that is not that they love us so much they really couldn't wait to get back to the library. Some of it is, this pandemic affected the students just as badly as all of us financially, and they needed to come back. But I mean, that was why we spent so much time over the break, not just concentrating on our spaces, but concentrating on the student spaces too. We changed a lot of staff offices. We took over a couple of different rooms that we didn't usually use for staff offices so we could space the students out. Because we knew frank, to be frank, students are probably our biggest vector, of possible infection in the department, simply because they're students on campus. And while I like to believe that I look young enough to be a student on campus, I am no longer one, and no longer would like to deal with some of those students' faces. And so it was okay, it was okay bringing them back, but they were we have had a couple positive tests that the students had. And luckily our procedures and policies in the department prevented further spread among the staff. So, I mean, it seemed weird to say like, oh, we only had X number of positive tests in the department, but in hindsight, it feels like, oh God, here we go again in January. I hope that the fall was actually not so bad in hindsight. I guess we'll see. That was a very long explainer.
No, thank you. Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
For EKU with our student workers, this started on spring break for us. So they extended the spring break. And then at the end of that one, they said no students were allowed back on campus in March. So we have stayed open this entire time. And so it's just been the circulation staff that's been in the building pretty much. And so we didn't get students back until August, but EKU did somehow allow us to pay institutional pay to our student workers almost through the end of the spring of the semester. So they had some payment, even though they weren't here working with us. But then I guess that ran out, or they called it quits a little bit earlier at the end. So we were able to sort of keep them on without them being here for a few weeks. And then they just came back in August with us when school started back for us.
That's interesting, Ashley. We had hoped that we could do something similar, but U of L kind of gave us the big X. If they weren't working on something we could demonstrably point at, they didn't want to pay them, which was a very U of L response to many things. But one of the things we have been able to do on the back end is we changed our pay structure for all of the students who came back, and we bumped up the pay rates for all of the students who have been working. And obviously you don't want to call it hazard pay because it's not hazard pay, and that would involve 85 different policies that I don't want to touch on, but we basically have given them a raise for coming back at all. And I hope that we can keep sticking with that long term, because I think one thing the pandemic made very clear is for big departments or for big units, you can't do it anymore without a good cadre of student assistants. Our FTE is 25,000 people, and 25,000 people didn't come back to campus, but enough of them came back that our demands, at least for building usage, have remained high. And that doesn't always mean that everybody's checking stuff out, but our building occupancy counts have remained astoundingly high for the entire semester, probably problematically so, honestly, but that's pretty, Jamie, it feels that's the biggest issue.
Well, that actually hits on a question I was going to ask that's not really related to WMS in particular, but because we're supposed to reopen mid-January, and we're still trying to figure out how we're going to maintain, the safe occupancy levels. We last year we bought a people counting system above our entrance, just so we could have a better, more reliable way of tracking our traffic. And they've added a software package to it called Safe Space that allows you to attach a monitor, and I guess you can set a limit of how many people can be in the building, and it will show green or red as people enter. But again, that relies on people paying attention to it. If it's red, pausing, maybe turning around, leaving, not going to happen. So I wondered what protocols did you put in place to kind of manage your occupancy levels?
Well, I'll jump in real quick because I'll say this. U of L, we did not do a very good job at it. And frankly, we're still struggling with the effects of not doing a good job at it. Ashley, though, EKU, from what I heard, you guys had a wonderful system. Ashley, would you be willing to talk about yours? I was so jealous of yours that I plan on talking to my dean about it next week.
Yeah, so with our system, I believe it is Safe Space that they've used for the camera, and we have a TV monitor that's set up. We've extended our circulation desk to be right in front of our door. So we have a person who sits there, and we have a person who sits back at a different desk. And we thankfully hired a student who graduated from EKU into our library IT department, like at the beginning of COVID. And he was able to create this tracker tracer system for us that is based off of their swipe in and out for their EKU ID. So every person who comes in, and we've closed our other entrances, so there's only one entrance into our library now. So they have to swipe in on one side of our desk, and then it counts them, but it also counts their number for like contact tracing, and we can pinpoint who that person is. And then as they go out, they swipe out on the other side. So it's also still 6 feet apart. And the desk, the person who's sitting at the desk has plexiglass all around it. So the hope is that that will protect that person as well. And so we sort of had a one way in, one way out to keep everyone sorted. And so the swiping in system has really helped us keep track. And also we've closed to the public and non-students. So anyone who has graduated or alumni that used to be able to come in who may have an EKU card, if they swipe it, it will tell us that they're not current or that it's a bad read. And then we have to ask the questions of, are you a current student? Are you faculty or your staff? If they answer no to any of those questions, unfortunately, they cannot come into the building because it's closed to our immediate EKU community. And so Guy, that's the person who created it, he's updated it 3 or 4 times now to try and just make it a little bit easier and user friendly for us, because he created it completely all on his own for us. So it's been real helpful now.
You know, you mentioned that, and I really like that idea. We explored initially doing it on LibCal, which has some really nice occupancy count options. And we took a look at, I don't know if I can find it, I'll drop it in the chat, but University of Alabama had a really cool application of LibCal where it was quite literally, they mapped out their entire library, put the entire library on LibCal right down to the seat. And if you wanted to come into the building, you had to book your seat ahead of time. You picked the library, the floor, the room, and the chair. And you know, not to throw anybody under the bus, but our people in charge of LibCal took one look at that and said, you know what, maybe next semester. So that I think is one we may end up adopting. But like I said, it's a lot of work, to put all of that into the system. And the one thing that we haven't had that, I really liked it, what EKU has done is we didn't try and shut down enough entrances that I think we will be doing in the spring. And we had originally had our DPS officers, checking the IDs at the door. But as many staff and students have told me, that only works if the DPS officers aren't playing on their iPads or snoozing. So the level of desk protection has been abysmal, frankly, and it's pretty much it's been bad enough that enough campus constituents have complained that we'll almost certainly have to rehaul everything for the spring. And this is one of those issues, is it's such a big library, and I said there's so many different parts of different other libraries that without one single policy as to how we're going to handle it, or one single LibCal system, what you get are a bunch of different competing ideas and a bunch of different people who are saying, well, is it my position to do this? Is it your position to do this? And that kind of breakup of responsibility means that it ends up nobody does it. And I've kind of said over and over again, and Alice has heard this about 1 billion times, is we don't mind doing it. AUS doesn't mind doing it. The problem is if we're the only unit in the building that's trying to do circulation, interlibrary loan, keep the doors open, keep the lights on, if you start to hand us the enforcement mechanism too, it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong. And that, that's not something I'd want to expose my staff to begin with, much less, in a time like this where it's it feels like Russian roulette every time you go up to the upper floors with the students and their mask problems. So if I sound more depressed on a Friday, it's because, it's been a long week.
Because you are.
Yes, because I am.
I have a question for Ashley, because yesterday's session with, circulation, I'm trying to think, the lady's name from EKU as well mentioned about the 300-person limit in the library. And I was curious, what is the normal limit of EKU's library before COVID. Okay. I'm soon. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm relatively new still to EKU. Like I just came up on my 1 year. So I've had approximately from September to March of normal time working at EKU. So I also worked in the evening, so all of my stuff is sort of skewed that way. But we had a lot of groups that would come in. That we were a high traffic area for groups, so we would have sororities, fraternities, any sort of like on campus organization. They had their meetings here. So in the nighttime, I would see 40 people come in, but it would all be one frat, and they would go to like our auditorium, and that's where they would be. So compared to now, when I have, this is the end of our finals week right now, but no students are supposed to be on campus. We're getting 20 people a day in the evenings now, before when it would easily probably be up over 100 people, is what I can tell you. Now in the daytime, I know that especially, I think they said Tuesdays and Thursdays used to be their real popular areas, like in the daytime, but for us in the evenings, it was always like Monday, Wednesday, we would have quite a few people come in and whatnot.
That helps. I think y'all kind of comparable to us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
kind of sounds like it. So, I appreciate the detail you gave, Ashley. It helps. It helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, are there any other, I mean, I know this is a small crew. I think we're circulationed out a bit, but are there any other questions or thoughts? I'm happy to listen rather than just chatting. Well, we can call this one early, frankly. This is circ session number 3. I think we've all circed ourselves out. Well, okay. In that case, I probably will just go ahead and end the recording, and if you guys want, we can just jump on back into the main crew. I'm sure Brandy will be happy to see us and have somebody to chat with instead of sitting all alone in her main office. Thank you guys for talking about circulation again.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. See you guys in a bit.